Muted.
Introduction to SCOR. Today I'd like to introduce our presenter, Peter Balsdorf, Executive Vice President with APICS.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. As we get started with this webinar, I'd first like to give you a little bit of perspective. I've had the opportunity to work with SCOR since the Dallas SCOR 1.0 event, which simply means I've made the most mistakes. I hope to share with you a little bit of insight from my experience. I think the other couple things of note from my experience is the opportunity that I had to write down the formula for using SCOR in a book called Supply Chain Excellence. And it really highlights the number of projects that I've had the opportunity to support globally. The point about helping companies use SCOR is important, and we'll talk specifically about the benefits that can be derived from that as we go through the talk. So I want to focus on answering 7 good questions. Who is the APICS Supply Chain Council? What is SCOR? Why do companies use SCOR? How do companies use SCOR? What are the benefits? Who else is using it? And then how can I or my company get started? So we'll get going. Who is the council? So the APICS Supply Chain Council was merged with APICS officially August of last year. Technically, Supply Chain Council merged with the APICS Foundation. The important part of that is that as a membership organization, the council has always been associated with organizations. In the merge with the APICS Foundation, a nonprofit public charity, we're able to maintain that corporate relationship. Companies affiliate with the APICS Supply Chain Council through what we call a subscription. And there are a number of benefits that we've been working very hard at putting together from a value proposition standpoint. Things like participating in research projects, special interest groups, participating on a corporate advisory board and our executive summit, having access to our benchmark like SCORmark, introducing our manufacturing site and distribution site benchmarks, as well as our new supply chain talent benchmarks, having access to our digital library and the other frameworks that are listed there. Training, the SCOR P training, is now available through the traditional APICS channel partners. So our new phrase is APICS for Business, which brings the total value proposition of the training and certification strengths of APICS and the research benchmarking and framework strengths from the APICS Supply Chain Council. So this new value proposition is something that we're very excited about and that we're bringing to the corporate environment globally. So a little bit about what is SCOR. So this is probably the most popular graphic. As you can see, SCOR is an end-to-end model, supplier to customer. And the planning process, or the processes of plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable. With this particular graphic, imagine that your organization is in the middle, and you can ask yourself the question for your largest product or service: who is my customer? Who is my customer's customer? And then likewise, as we move the other direction, who is my supplier and who is my supplier's supplier? This model has helped many companies start with a standardized way of viewing supply chain as opposed to a white sheet of paper. In 1996, the value of having a reference model really focused on 4 things. And I remember at that time, in 1996, again, we were coming up to Y2K, and so there was a whole lot of stakeholders from logistics companies to software vendors to advisory companies, consultants, who were defining supply chain in their own viewpoint. When PRTM and AMR brought together the 69 companies to put this together, the biggest thing was being able to commonly define a business process for supply chain that we could use as part of our re-engineering fabric. It also lists in one document the best practices that are assigned by process. Probably the biggest and most popular benefit for corporations is the idea that we have metrics that are tied to the process that can be benchmarked and have been benchmarked since the beginning. And then most recently, we've added the people section, where we really talk about people skills and how they relate to process performance. And as part of the APICS family now, we're working towards individual supply chain talent assessment. We introduced at the early part of 2015 the SCOR app. It's downloadable either through the App Store with iTunes or Google Play from an Android point of view. Search APICS SCOR. The cost is 99 cents, and the good news is all proceeds go towards our student programs as part of the APICS Supply Chain Council. This next graphic, if you talk about the process part of it, is the metrics. And this is the SCOR Level 1 metrics. As you can see on the left-hand side, we've got 5 attributes. The first 3 are customer-facing. The second 2 are internal-facing. This is the palette of choices. Most companies pick, as they get started using SCOR, they pick 1 from each category. The most popular ones by category: perfect order fulfillment, so on time and complete, without quality or other issues. Order fulfillment cycle time, so customer order to customer delivery receipt. Upside supply chain flexibility, which is essentially the stack lead time of your products. Total cost to serve, and then a subset of the cash-to-cash inventory days of supply. Those would be the 5 most frequently used metrics. SCOR, along with the metrics and all of the best practices and the people sections, are hierarchical and traditionally have been decomposed to 3 levels. The first level is really focused on the major processes and the scope. The second one really focuses on the strategies that you pick: make to stock, make to order, engineer to order. The third really focuses on work and information flow. The example that you see on the screen focuses on the first 6 processes within the deliver stock product. And the last one, we are very excited to be introducing our future scope is a standardized set of SCOR Level 4 processes. For those of you that have implemented SCOR or been part of it, you know that in order for you to gain the benefits of using the model, you have to implement at the Level 4 hierarchy. So we have, we're getting started with 2 things. One is an interest group that will be focusing on collating all of the SCOR Level 4 work that's been done by industry and by system orientation, SAP, Oracle, JDA, etc. And then we have a research project that's actually focusing on that as well. So stay tuned. They will become part of our digital library. SCOR is one of 4 frameworks that we've introduced over time. The second one that was introduced around the 2004 timeframe was DCOR, the Product and Process Design Process. Shortly thereafter, followed by the sales support, which is a really good model. Of course, it's not used as frequently as the other ones. I've always said it's a big sell to be able to convince your executives in sales and marketing that process discipline is a good thing. The most recently introduced one is something we call PL-CORE, Product Life, and that focuses on the entire portfolio management process, which is essentially focusing on product management. And so we have active teams working on developing use cases in PL-CORE, DCOR, and of course SCOR. So let's focus a little bit on why companies use SCOR. So in preparation for this, we're going to conduct a live poll. And so for those of you that would like to participate, this is the web address to go to. When you get there, you're going to be at our poll site. When it's appropriate, I'm going to go turn on the poll, and you simply enter the number that's represented there. So again, this is the live poll website that we'll go to. So let me get you ready for the poll questions. So over time, and this is based on 150 projects, these are the 13 reasons why companies have been motivated to use SCOR. And so let me go through that. The first reason, if I start on the left, building a technology investment, that has largely been around system technology. So if you're getting ready for a big upgrade or a new system or something like that, that's the choice. Reason number two is return on investment for capacity. So either going into a new market, or introducing a new product line. The third reason is creating supply chain strategy, implementing supply chain performance, improving S&OP, and then 6, developing an organization talent roadmap. In the second column, we talk about maximizing the use of existing technology. So that would be trying to use more functionality of the system that you own, achieving operational excellence, merger or acquisition. Number 10 is the emerging one in terms of globalizing and managing a business process, so planning globally. Integrating with the greater value chain, so those companies, especially in aerospace and defense, is how do we link product portfolio management with design. Refreshing my project portfolio in Lean and Six Sigma, and then, of course, defining and building an efficient and effective supply chain organization. So we're going to go through 2 sets of poll questions. The first poll question is going to ask you to pick one from the first column. So pretend your company is going to be implementing SCOR next month. What is the main reason from the first column, first 6 reasons? So then we'll see what those results look like, and then we're going to go to the second poll question, which is 7 through 13, and you're going to pick a second reason. So I'm going to go to the live poll site and open the poll. And then I'm going to make that large. Okay, so those of you now that can be entering into the poll site, and you're going to see the poll adjusting dynamically. So we're going to give you about 20 seconds. It's always interesting for me to see how these go. So it looks like implementing supply chain performance improvements is the leader so far. Thank you for participating in the live poll. Just as an aside, we've been doing this live poll throughout the year. We've probably got 50 sessions across the planet. We're actually going to be publishing the results of what that looks like, but by region. So we're going to give this particular poll, we're going to give this one another 15 seconds or so. But it appears as though most of you are thinking about implementing supply chain performance improvements, shortly followed by S&OP, or integrated business planning. I know there's a number of flavors that people are calling that. Awesome. So thank you very much for that. We're going to move to the next poll question. So this is the first reason why your company would implement SCOR. We're going to move to the next one in the poll question. So your screens should be refreshed on your phones or your devices. So now you can enter another number. So it's going to be one of the next 6 or 7. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So keep entering. Fascinating. Excellent. So this is interesting. So as we've been doing this, of course, again, we've been doing this globally. And I just had the opportunity to do this exact same poll in Japan and China last week. And consistent with what we're seeing with this European population, global process management seems to be right at the top of the list although operational excellence and refreshing your continuous improvement portfolio is followed. I'm going to let this poll go for another 10 seconds or so. We will publish the results of this towards the end of the year, aggregate, to all of the participants worldwide. Oh, so we have a merger or acquisition. It's always good. Very good. All right, so we'll move back to the PowerPoint. So the cumulative results to date have really looked like this. So again, from the first column, number 4, so that was the idea of improving supply chain performance. And from the second column, number 8, which is really the operational excellence, have been the most popular so far. And I think what we found from this particular population, number 4 was consistent with the rest of the globe, and in this particular case, global process management actually rose to the top in the second column. Again, thank you for your participation. So let's talk a little bit about, now that we know why people want to use it, let's talk a little bit about how companies use SCOR. And so we've introduced this racetrack. So as I had mentioned earlier, I had authored the book called Supply Chain Excellence, and it's in its 3rd edition. Each edition was about 3 years apart and was based on the 30 projects previous to the actual published date. It's also published most recently now in Mandarin. We have 6 other languages that the book has been introduced in. The SCOR Racetrack was introduced through the APICS SCOR P training in July, and really took supply chain excellence and other user input in terms of companies who have demonstrated best practice application of SCOR and put that in the form of a normal racetrack. So one trip around the racetrack really is one portfolio of projects that can be implemented that have a value to it. And you can see we've got in the racetrack, we've got certain things in terms of building organizational support, pre-SCOR program steps. We have a section in the race that talks about setting the scope, using the idea of think big, act small, and then scale fast, which culminates in a program charter. We have a series of analytical processes where we look at analyzing metrics, analyzing process, practices, and people, that ultimately then, in the optimized projects, turns into a project portfolio that has a value that then is prioritized and then is ready for implementation. So again, those of you that are interested, our SCOR P certification class or endorsement class focuses 1 day on what is SCOR and 2 days on application of this racetrack in your company. So what I'd like to do is to highlight a couple of key deliverables around the racetrack that I think would be, I'll call it tips and techniques that you could start using today. So we're going to start with this idea of the supply chain definition matrix in the next graphic. So those of you that have used the Fresh Connection, actually it's quite a good simulation game, know that the Fresh Connection sells 3 kinds of product, orange drink products. You've got the Freshie Orange, the Orange C Power, and the Orange Mango. And those of you know that they also have 2 packaging types, the PET bottle and the 1 liter. You also know that the Fresh Connection sells those products into 3 different channels. Each X is what we call a supply chain. And so as a unit of measure, we can see that in this particular case, there are 15 supply chains. So we've got retail and food, grocery that have 6, discount markets are 6, and then we've got 3 within the convenience store. For each supply chain, we start to look for data that would give us a sense of the importance or the priority of this supply chain. So we've got examples of types of data that we would collect. So demand units per week, line service level, gross margin, stock units. And there are some things that we can keep track of by product, and there are some things that we can keep track of by column. And so the idea behind the supply chain definition matrix is to A, define your products and channels, and B, start to think about which supply chain would I use to focus my pilot on. So a second deliverable in the racetrack is really to talk about your overall organization. And this is the most critical. So the two most critical roles in building organizational support is finding that active executive sponsor. And APICS has had the good fortune to partner with the Supply Chain Management Review and actually start to understand what is it about our supply chain executives, really understand what that profile is, what makes a good active executive sponsor, what helps them save more things faster as opposed to less things later. The second role is what we call the program champion, or I call the evangelist. This is that senior leader that actually becomes a SCOR expert and can evangelize and perpetuate the use of SCOR within an organization. We know today that companies within the Supply Chain Council that have had subscriptions for greater than 10 years, all of them have done more than 20 projects thinking globally around how many supply chains that they have and where they want to use the tool to be able to improve performance. Those two roles then help define for each program, for each trip around the racetrack, a team leader, an improvement team, based on plan, source, make, deliver, return, IT, finance, and some kind of a continuous improvement analytical resource. So again, the most common footprint for a program. Again, at the end of the scope define stage, we put together a program charter. These are the sections. So what is your scope, business objectives, program objectives, what does your organization look like, what methodology, schedule do we have? This particular thing, think about it like a contract between the executive sponsoring team and the project team. So if the executive sponsors agree to give resource, then the project team is going to agree to produce these deliverables and recommend these sets of improvements. So again, another critical one. As we move into the analyze phase, the configure phase, one of the first things we do is for the scope of the project, we try to identify the scope of entities or locations. And so this is a sample from the SCOR P class that talks about here are the suppliers that are in scope for the project, here's the locations inside of the company, and then here's the customers that are defined as in scope. So this document then gets converted into a geographic map where we then identify the SCOR processes that are being used by location, and then we map out the physical flow of the product. Again, two tools in the analytical phase where we try to understand how things work and then recommend how things need to change. The other key part in the analytical phase, in the configure phase, is what we call our SCOR mark. So as I mentioned earlier, we are introducing an expanded set of benchmarking capabilities. The SCOR mark has been with us the longest, but we're also introducing manufacturing site, a distribution site later in 2016, and we're very excited about the potential of talent assessment, a corporate talent assessment. So within this particular one, the SCOR mark, again, you can see the 5 attributes, the selected metrics that are in scope, the benchmark category. Within the SCOR mark database, we've got about 1,000 companies and 2,000 different supply chains. We benchmark at the supply chain level. We've asked the team to then identify a target level of performance. Where do I want to be? Where is your current state? And then you've got your gap. So one piece of advice that I would always recommend is we never book the gap to your executives. We always have to go through another analytical process for each metric that uses the familiar failure modes and effect analysis that you get in your Six Sigma programs. We understand where the failures are. That becomes the core to building our project list. We also go through a process in our configure analytics to understand what are the best practices that matter, and then what maturity level are you participating at. This is a list of the SCOR practices by classification. Within each process, there'll be a list that we would go through and select, and then understand from a process maturity standpoint where you're performing at. We also go through from a process point of view. We go through and understand, and this is an example, from a blueprint standpoint, where are your processes good, green, where are your processes needing improvement, which is yellow, and then which processes are broken or missing, which would be the red ones. So again, with the reference model concept, we can tie metrics to practices to process. And then we have our last set of analyses, which really focus on people and skills. And I guess the graphic is intended to reference the fact that, again, we can connect performance, practices, and processes to people. And this is really the last mile for us from an APICS point of view. So now we can really understand the skill level and knowledge and skill level from a people standpoint, and recommend, based on some hard analytics, what kinds of development activities we can recommend dependent on level, so director, manager, analytics, and by process, plan, source, make, deliver, return, enable. So this graphic is just an attempt to portray the fact that we have put from a total value proposition in our APICS for Business portfolio, we are able to support a business regardless of what maturity level that they're performing at. And we can support both the individual and organization, and then be able to benchmark and measure the impact. So again, APICS for Business is something that we're very excited about, and we're rolling out as part of our 2016 year. This last one is really the most favorite benefit from the project. So we're now at the right side of the racetrack, really talking about the portfolio. This is just a partial sample. You can see that we've skipped projects 5 through 11. Essentially what happens is, through a grouping process, we're able to group our failures and our process disconnects into projects that have a phrase and a description. And through our failure modes, we're able to then identify for each metric on our scorecard what is the benefit of that particular project. And if we drop down to the benefit total, you can see the cumulative impact of all projects by metric, and then you can see the projected performance level. So at the end of the day, this is really the core output that the executive team is looking for. So what are the benefits? So let's just say I've gone around, I've done a good job, I've gone around the racetrack, and what are the benefits that I can expect? And there's 2 points I want to make on this one. The first is, from a SCOR implementation standpoint, what we know, based on people who have done a good job going around the racetrack, we know that that portfolio, the one that I just described, has an average income, operating income improvement of 3% to the sales value of the supply chain that you analyze. So if you analyze 100 million euro, you're going to have 3 million euro in opportunity. Half of that typically is growth-oriented, half of that is cost reduction. Aside from the typical other improvements in terms of inventory, reliability, and flexibility, the one that we see emerging is this idea of using the SCOR Level 4 blueprint. And what we're finding is, as companies that are more mature in their use of SCOR are blueprinting their processes at Level 4, they're finding that subsequent to the first go-live, they're getting 30% faster implementations with 30% more functionality at the subsequent go-live. So in terms of project cost to roll out either upgrades or optimizations globally, people are experiencing or enjoying better, faster, cheaper from an implementation benefit standpoint. We are starting to recreate what we call, an illustration only, our APICS SCC Global Fund. So we are taking those companies that have used SCOR the longest, that have a public record or domain, and keeping track of how they perform against some other key indices. In this particular case, the dark green are the APICS Supply Chain Council companies, and the light green would be the S&P 500. And so one of our research focuses this year that we will be publishing is to understand the impact of supply chain on earnings per share. And so comparing supply chain maturity, the SCOR mark performance, and earnings per share, and understanding, by investing in your supply chain, what you can expect both in near-term and longer-term earnings per share. So that research we're looking to introduce sometime in the third quarter. So who else is using SCOR? Our corporate relationships, so our snapshot is we've got 400, and you can see how they're divided. Our corporate affiliates and sponsors. Sponsors would be typical companies in the business services segment, so software, advisory, logistics services, other membership organizations. And then corporate affiliates would be those companies that are operating supply chains. You can see from an academic standpoint, we have a number, and then public sector. And you can see geographically the spread. But at the end of the day, when you look at our corporate affiliates, they're all in the, many of them or most of them are in the Global 2000 footprint, and nearly all of those have maybe headquarters in one geographic region or another, but from a realistic standpoint, they all have operating companies in every region. So again, our global focus is really just that, global. This is a list of those companies that have been invited to our executive summit in February. So you can see again, not just the US, not just Europe. And again, if you look at those companies, I would suggest that every one of those companies has operating units in every major region. So we're very excited about the level of engagement that we are having with the Global 2000. We see that trend continuing. We see that our subscription rate continues to increase. So how do you get engaged with APICS? Well, there's two. So let's talk about how your company gets engaged. And so, so again, an affiliate would be those of you on the phone or on the webinar that are in companies that operate supply chains. So if you make a choice to subscribe to the APICS Supply Chain Council, all of your global employees have access to our content with an email login. You get one person that gets invited to our executive summit. You can participate in our research projects and special interest groups. Probably the most popular one right now is the humanitarian supply chain. So that's being launched. You get to participate in our benchmark series, access to our digital library, of course, having access to our training and frameworks. From a sponsor standpoint, we've introduced a new program that actually licenses your business globally to use our content as part of your product or service. The Supply Chain Council in its legacy format did not do that. We're getting great feedback in terms of being able to be recognized as a licensed APICS sponsor and being able to use that as part of your product or service. Again, and then very similar to the affiliates, having a program management role in our Leader of Leaders focus forums, the Summit Library, etc. From an individual standpoint, again, if you look at the other side of the engagement model, from an evangelist. So if you're considered one of those internal corporate evangelists, what should you do? Well, for sure, download the SCOR app. It's a very simple 99 cents going to our student programs. Attend a public training class. The other thing that people don't recognize is the fact that from an APICS standpoint, the CSCP certification really mirrors the SCOR end-to-end supply chain, both from supplier to customer's customer, as well as from strategy to operations. And there are sections within that individual certification that focus on SCOR metrics and SCOR process. So from an individual point of view, the suggestion is earn your CSCP certification. If your company is interested in pursuing a SCOR transformation event, then we would suggest going the distance to get your SCOR P endorsement and, of course, become an APICS member and get on the research. From a sponsor standpoint, if you're on the sponsor list, we are introducing a series of executive briefings, and we would list those on our APICS website, and we're doing that globally. Contact myself, and I have a couple of other folks on there to discuss what are the programs and how can I get my company involved. Budget for an affiliation, and we can talk about what that subscription looks like. If you're serious already, host an in-house SCOR class. So we have globally we have SCOR P trainers that can customize an in-house SCOR class just for you. Benchmark your company, participate on an APICS corporate advisory board, and attend our summit. So to continue the conversation, of course, please feel free to contact me, Carolyn Lawrence, or Dominic Longo, or Melinda Spring. All of us can answer any question that you might have as it relates to your company's use of SCOR. Again, visit us online, and with that, I am going to turn it back to Jim, and we can focus on some questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter. It is time now for the question and answer. So we'll give you a few moments for those participating on the webinar to send in your questions, and Peter will take a few minutes here to respond back to those that are being received. Thank you.
All right, first question is how long does it take to implement the SCOR Racetrack? And so if I go back to the picture of the racetrack, and we'll stay there. So typically what we find in implementing the racetrack, the longest is in building organizational support. And that's also the most critical. If I can't get an active executive sponsor and an evangelist, SCOR is a very difficult thing to implement at a grassroots level. So once I've got the support and I measure it from the SCOR workshop in-house, then I can go through defining the supply chain, which is about a 3-week process, configure the supply chain in 6 to 9 weeks, putting together the project portfolio and benefit summaries another 3 to 6 weeks, and then this ready for implementation, depending on how you prioritized it, you can implement anywhere from 6 to 18 months for that particular supply chain. And so what we find is a company will put together a macro view of their supply chains and then be very strategic over a 3 to 5 year period of time of where I'm going to deploy the racetrack. Thank you for that question. So the next question that we have is, what is the relationship between SCOR and financial performance? So if I were to go back to, I'll use two graphics to answer that question. The first one is the SCOR mark. And so we know within the total supply chain management cost, we know how to break that down by SCOR process level. So we have material acquisition, we have order management costs, we have planning and finance, and of course, as part of that, we have cost of goods. So the model itself should, as we go through and fill it out, the model itself links process to metric. In addition to that, when we go to look at how we put together the benefit, we're able to then take and group those processes and using our failure modes and effect analysis, be able to then estimate by metric the total portfolio, which then we can apply to the P&L. Great question. Thank you. Next question. Should the company have a minimum size? That is another great question. So let me go back to the racetrack. What we know is that SCOR, this process works regardless of company size. So the difference is, how do you engage the team? Of course, in a smaller company, everybody does everything. Everybody wears many hats. And so we have to right-size the expectations from a deliverable standpoint versus a company that is focused on a very large, multi-billion-dollar supply chain. So it is very easily scalable. The benefits ratios are exactly the same in terms of percentages. We just need to focus on making sure that the project team is right-sized and that we are very managed about the deliverables. Another great question. We have time for one more question. And that would be, where can practitioners find the schedule of training events that will be held in Europe? And which certificate is essential for those who never got SCOR training? Very good question. So if you go to the APICS website, we have a list of all training, SCOR training sessions globally. And so we are right now in the process of putting together the training schedule for 2016. So it's going to be one of those things where we're going to try to have that announced shortly. But as we have demand, we will then be able to add events from a supply point of view. So from a certificate standpoint, what I would suggest for SCOR training is the SCOR Peak class is a 3-day event. And just like learning any language, unless your company is going to use SCOR as part of the racetrack, it's one of those things where you'll go to class, you're going to experience a very good, you're going to have a very good experience. But if your company is not intending on using it, or if you still need to go in and convince your evangelist and executive sponsor, sometimes you lose some of the knowledge that you gained in the 3 days. So you have to be very strategic about how many people that you would send to a SCOR P type class. And as I indicated earlier, and I just experienced this myself, the CSEP certificate or certification is a great individual focus. Really focuses on the body of knowledge end to end, and it has SCOR built into it. And so for those of you that are legacy APICS type roles, we are very, very much interested in the CSCP as an alternative. Thank you, Dirk. The Stockholm training in February is already scheduled, February 16 until 18. Thank you for that. So with that, I am going to conclude my Q&A. For those questions that keep coming in, we will publish a Q&A that will be tied to the actual YouTube footage of this particular webinar. Thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.